I have been sitting with this one for a few days now, and I cannot shake it. I have watched a lot of things go sideways in my years around government, made my own share of calls that did not land the way I hoped, and I will be the first to admit that. But what happened on Sunday, March the 23rd, is something different. It is a moment I want to walk through with you carefully, because when you see how it unfolded, hour by hour, you start to understand that the gap between what the American people are being told and what is actually happening has gotten dangerously wide. So stay with me. On Sunday morning, before the sun was fully up on the East Coast, a post appeared on Truth Social. The president announced that the United States and Iran were engaged in productive conversations. He said a deal was close. He described 15 points of agreement. He said Iran had committed to never obtaining a nuclear weapon. He promised an imminent phone call between the two governments. Markets responded immediately. The stock market surged, adding roughly $1.7 trillion in value across the session. Oil prices dropped 11%. For about 90 minutes, the entire global financial system recalibrated itself around the idea that peace was breaking out in the Persian Gulf. And then Iran spoke. The Speaker of Iran's parliament came out and denied every single word. No talks, no negotiations, no conversations of any kind. He called the entire announcement fabricated, designed to manipulate markets. And while the president was still out in Palm Beach telling reporters about his mystery negotiating partner, American and Israeli warplanes were hitting Iranian cities. That is not a mixed signal. That is two completely different realities colliding in broad daylight. Over the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through precisely how a president who positioned himself as the man bringing this war to an end got exposed in under 2 hours. And we need to talk about the trading data from that morning, because what happened in those markets before the Post even went live is something every American deserves to understand. We will come back to that. Now, standing in front of cameras at Palm Beach, the president refused to identify the Iranian official he claimed to be negotiating with. He said revealing the name would get the man killed. He described this person as the most respected figure in Iran's leadership outside the supreme leader. And then he used a phrase I need you to hear. He called this man a really hot option, a good potential partner, a possible future leader of Iran. An Israeli official later confirmed the identity to Axios. The man in question is Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, former commander in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, former mayor of Tehran for over a decade, a close associate of Mojtaba Khamenei, who assumed the role of supreme leader after his father, Ali Khamenei, was killed on February the 28th during the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury. Ghalibaf is now widely regarded as one of the most senior civilian figures inside Iran's ruling structure. He is not some back-channel moderate. He is a pillar of the regime itself. And here is what actually happened behind the scenes. Sources with direct knowledge told multiple outlets independently that there were no direct talks between Washington and Tehran, not one. What took place was something far more modest. Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan were carrying messages back and forth between Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, third countries passing notes. On Sunday, a single source described what existed as readiness from both sides to begin a conversation, an atmosphere, a willingness. That is the entire substance of what the president announced to the world as 15 points of agreement and an imminent phone call. The meeting he described to reporters had not taken place. Most people think this was aggressive spin from a president trying to put the best face on a bad situation. In reality, the financial data from that morning makes that explanation very hard to sustain. 15 minutes before the Truth Social post appeared, the oil futures market erupted. Reuters reported that between 6:49 and 6:50 in the morning, New York time, Approximately 5,100 Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate futures contracts traded in a single 60-second window. By Reuters' own calculations, that burst was worth more than $500 million. 1 minute. On a quiet Monday morning with no scheduled economic releases, no central bank announcements, nothing on the calendar, trading volume in that window ran 4 to 6 times the normal rate for that hour. At the same moment, $1.5 billion in S&P 500 futures were purchased, positioning for a rally. $192 million in oil futures were sold, positioning for a price drop. Then the post landed. Oil fell. Stocks surged. Every single one of those trades was correct. To the direction, 15 minutes early. The Financial Times confirmed this reporting using Bloomberg terminal data. Several hedge fund managers described the timing as highly irregular. One said it naturally raises curiosity about who might have acted on that information ahead of time. The White House responded through spokesperson Kush Desai, calling any suggestion of insider profiteering baseless and irresponsible. That denial offered no alternative explanation for why 6,200 oil contracts traded at 4 to 6 times normal volume in the minute before 6:50 on a morning when nothing else was scheduled to happen. Towards the end of this video, I am going to show you exactly why the 5-day pause was structured to expire on Friday. That timing was not accidental, and the energy markets tell you why. But first, you need to understand what was physically happening on the ground while peace was being announced from Palm Beach. That same night, American and Israeli strikes hit targets across Iran. Reuters, citing Iran's Fars news agency, reported strikes on a gas company facility and a pressure reduction station in Isfahan. A projectile struck a gas pipeline feeding a power station in Khorramshahr. In Bushehr province, which already suffers from severe water shortages, a critical desalination plant and the adjacent meteorological office were destroyed. Youssef Sobhani Nisab, the head of the Bushehr Airport Meteorological Office, was killed at his post. That facility managed water resource forecasting and agricultural planning for one of the driest provinces in the country. When you are striking water infrastructure in a region where people already cannot get enough clean water, you are not degrading military capacity. You are engineering a humanitarian crisis. And I want you to hold that thought, because the last major leader who described a full military invasion of a sovereign nation as something other than a war was Vladimir Putin, talking about Ukraine in 2022. Iran responded with what the Revolutionary Guard is formally calling True Promise 4, the 78th wave of retaliatory strikes. 7 power transmission lines knocked out in Kuwait. The Al Amadi oil refinery struck multiple times. More than a dozen drones intercepted over Saudi Arabia's eastern province. The UAE's Al Dhafra air base hit by Iranian missiles. Tel Aviv under sustained air defense engagement. Ballistic missiles targeting the northern Negev and Haifa. Over 1 million people displaced from Lebanon, roughly a fifth of that country's entire population. We also need to talk about the military picture because it is heading in the exact opposite direction from what the White House has been telling the public. On March the 20th, a reporter asked the president whether more troops were being sent to the region. His response was direct: "No, I am not putting troops anywhere. And if I were, I certainly would not tell you." That same week, the Pentagon was quietly moving significant military assets. The USS Tripoli and USS New Orleans, carrying approximately 2,200 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, are expected to enter CENTCOM's area of responsibility this Friday, March the 27th. They will need several additional days to reach the Strait of Hormuz. Separately, the Pentagon ordered the California-based 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard the USS Boxer Amphibious Ready Group to deploy though current reporting indicates that unit is expected to depart in the coming weeks rather than having already sailed. The Pentagon is also preparing elements of the 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, roughly 3,000 paratroopers who can be anywhere on Earth within 18 hours. Senior commanders have submitted formal deployment requests. Internal Pentagon discussions have included logistics for processing Iranian detainees. Let that settle for a moment. Detention logistics. For a war the president says does not require any additional troops. 50,000 American service members are already positioned across the region, and the USS Gerald R. Ford, one of 2 carrier strike groups assigned to this theater, is currently sitting in Suda Bay, Greece, undergoing repairs after a fire broke out in its machinery space last week. The Navy describes the ship as fully mission capable while it remains docked in a Greek port. That means the United States currently has 1 operational aircraft carrier covering the entire Iran theater. Most people think the president is managing a careful diplomatic process behind the scenes. The Pentagon is examining options that include securing the Strait of Hormuz and, in some reporting, even Karg Island, though Reuters says no decision has been made to send American troops into Iran. Here is what Iran is actually doing while the diplomatic theater plays out. Iran is not just blockading the strait. It is operating what amounts to a parallel maritime authority. Reuters reported that Tehran is considering imposing transit fees on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz and has stated that non-belligerent nations may pass only by coordinating directly with Iran. Tehran has also declared the strait remains open to vessels not affiliated with what it calls enemy countries. The overall picture is unmistakable. Iran is attempting to exert selective control over the most important shipping lane on Earth, even if some of the more specific claims about confirmed payments and formal corridor agreements are not yet solid enough to state as established fact. Iran's Defense Council has also threatened to mine Gulf access routes with various types of sea mines if its coastline or islands come under attack. The waterway narrows to just 21 miles at its tightest point. Even the alternative route through Oman is under pressure. Reuters reported drone strikes on fuel infrastructure at Duqm and Salalah earlier this month, though Oman said oil supply continuity was maintained and Maersk paused port operations at Salalah rather than citing a total shutdown. By March the 11th, Reuters reported at least 16 ships had been struck across the region and that traffic through the strait had fallen roughly 95% from pre-war levels. Hundreds of vessels have dropped anchor inside and outside the Gulf. Around 20,000 seafarers remain stranded at sea. Consider what that means for ordinary people. 21% of the world's daily oil supply moves through that choke point. Every barrel that does not move drives up the price of gasoline, heating fuel, fertilizer, and everything that travels by truck or ship, which is nearly everything you buy. Now, I want to give credit where it is due. The original military objectives of this operation were ambitious and clearly defined. Operation Epic Fury launched on February the 28th with public goals centered on degrading Iran's missile launch infrastructure, weakening its defense industry and navy, and preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this week that those objectives remain unchanged. But here is the part that barely made headlines, even though it may be the most important strategic admission of this entire conflict. U.S. officials told the Washington Post, and Israeli officials confirmed separately to Axios, that the original goals of this war are no longer considered achievable. The practical center of gravity has shifted entirely to the Strait of Hormuz. That is where the military pressure, the economic leverage, and the political stakes are now concentrated. They killed the supreme leader on day one. His son consolidated power within 24 hours. The regime did not fracture. The Revolutionary Guard radicalized. Iran shifted to a heavier payload doctrine, deploying missiles with 1,000-kilogram warheads and high-impact penetration capability. The launch frequency went down. The damage per individual strike went up. Netanyahu publicly cited the reduced frequency as a sign of progress. The Guard was concentrating its remaining force, not exhausting it. One source close to the White House told Politico this week, and I want you to hear the exact weight of this, "We clearly just kicked their ass in the field, but to a large extent they hold the cards now." Now let me show you why the 5-day pause was built the way it was. The president posted on a Monday morning, 2 hours before markets opened. The pause expired Friday at the close of the energy trading week. 5 trading days, maximum market relief, minimum operational commitment. Brent crude dropped from $114 a barrel to $99 on the announcement. It was back above 103 by Tuesday morning. The pause moved prices in the desired direction for precisely as long as it needed to, and the energy numbers explain why moving markets was urgent. Brent crude started this conflict at $65 a barrel. It peaked at 126 in mid-March. The International Energy Agency has described this as the largest crude supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, exceeding the 1973 and 1979 oil crises combined. 20 million barrels of crude and refined product exports per day have been disrupted. The IEA released 400 million barrels from strategic reserves, the largest coordinated intervention in the agency's 52-year history. The market absorbed it and kept climbing. Brent hit $100 the day the reserves were released and continued upward. 400 million barrels covers roughly 9 to 10 days of the supply gap. IEA Chief Fatih Birol confirmed this week that 40 energy facilities across 9 countries have sustained severe damage. Qatar Energy has declared force majeure on several international liquefied natural gas contracts. Roughly 8 days of LNG buffer remains from Persian Gulf sources before the shortfall becomes physically acute. Fertilizer prices are surging heading into the American spring planting season, which means food costs are next. Helium supply, which is critical for MRI machines and semiconductor manufacturing, is being disrupted at a global level. United Airlines is canceling flights. Mortgage rates are tracking toward 5.5%. Apollo Global Management capped investor redemptions on one of its flagship funds after withdrawals hit approximately 11%. This is not abstract economic theory. This is the grocery bill, the gas pump, the mortgage payment, the farmer who cannot afford to plant. And here is the trap that has no clean way out. Iran's stated condition for ending this war is a new legal framework governing the Strait of Hormuz, codified Iranian authority over international shipping transit, a fundamental rewrite of maritime law, a direct challenge to American naval supremacy that has underwritten global trade since 1945. No president of either party can accept those terms and survive politically. But no military operation can reopen that strait without boots on Iranian soil, in a conflict where Reuters and Ipsos found that 55% of Americans oppose sending any ground troops into Iran. Only 7% support a large-scale ground war. The president's own approval rating sits at roughly 40% in the same polling. Iran built that box deliberately. You cannot take the strait from the air. You need ground forces to hold it. And the American public has made clear it does not want that fight. That is the strategic reality underneath all the Truth Social posts and the press conferences and the market fireworks. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un stood in front of North Korean nuclear-capable ballistic missiles this past week and declared his country's nuclear capability irreversible. No response from Washington. Because Washington is consumed by a war that a Data for Progress poll found 52% of Americans, including 52% of independents, believe was at least partly motivated by a desire to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein files. The 5-day pause expires at the end of this week. The USS Tripoli arrives Friday carrying Marines. The 82nd Airborne deployment requests are filed. The Boxer is preparing to sail. Iranian mines are in the water. The 78th wave was not the last. The man the president called his hot option told the entire world the president was not telling the truth. The strikes that were implied to be pausing never stopped. The troops described as staying home are already at sea, and the war objectives this conflict was launched to achieve have been quietly set aside. The clock is running, and I will say what I always say, because I believe it. This country has come through darker chapters than this one. We came through them because ordinary people like you watching right now, refused to look away, refused to accept a version of events that did not match what they could see with their own eyes. That is what is being asked of you now. Pay attention, demand answers, hold every person in power accountable, regardless of the letter next to their name, because the system only works when the people inside it know someone is watching. Thanks a lot for watching. Please join the discussion in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think comes out on top here? Do you think the war is getting out of hand? Let me know. Please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated. And click the video on the screen to see another.